5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
You are inside the guest studio.
So whenever I want to do a phone call where I'm going to hear the other person all the way through the conversation, I actually come to this spot. So
what town is that?
It's a town called Rhinebeck, New York.
Wow.
Yeah.
Is it hot? It's Montana's burning up. I mean, it's so un-Montana-ish.
Well, yeah, it's been hot here. You know, it's dying down now, but yeah, it's been bad. I hate heat waves. You know, we usually get like 2 every summer. So
what about everything else in that part of the world? How is are you keeping safe and healthy? And are your friends and neighbors doing the same?
Yeah, it looks that way. I mean, for instance, I got out of my car here and just walked down the street, and you know, it's like there's almost kind of like a buoyant atmosphere here, like people at outside tables sitting under tents just laughing, and you know, it's nice. You know, New York State, I guess, is one of the places that has coped with the thing better than other places, right? So I mean, I don't think you can go into a restaurant and eat, but maybe you can. You could a couple weeks ago, and I don't think that they've rescinded it. So, you know, it's still the people I feel bad for in my household are my 2 kids, because my son can't go to his classes on campus, you know. And
yeah,
it's just sort of a drag. You're right. It's a drag for a young person that wants to get out in the world to not be able to. He just turned 21 and he's stuck in the house, you know. So that I hate. But
yeah, mine just turned 23, and but one thing that I noticed, you know, that I was really surprised at becoming a dad was, you know, kids and their ability to adapt and bounce back. You know, it's a lot easier. It's not as easy for me now because, you know, I was so set in my ways, and there's this little thing that keeps gnawing at me, and it's the fact that, you know, I want to travel. I want to go somewhere. Well, I really didn't have any plans to go anywhere, but now I really want to go everywhere. But, yeah, my son, he's adapting. He, you know, he was just ready to do his last semester in college.
Yeah.
So we'll see how that goes.
I'm not complaining, you know. It's just, I know it has to be the way it is, or at least that's how it looks to me. I had 2 friends die right at the beginning of the whole thing.
Wow.
So I went into a funk for about 6 weeks after that.
Well,
but anyway, are we doing this now?
We're doing it. We're on, yeah. New York got hit. I mean, got slammed. But one of the things that really impressed me was the fact that they got serious about it. And, you know, like right now in Montana, we're having all these people that are coming here because they feel it's safe. So everywhere there's a room to rent, everybody that has a spare bedroom, you see all these Texas people in Florida, people in New York, people in California, people, they're everywhere, you know. And there's, in my little town, there's like nobody here usually at this time of year. And it's just full of people. Yeah. And so now, of course, we our cases are exploding, and all the restaurants are opening and everything at the same time, and it's every place you're going, every state is different. So I have no good answers. I just hopefully that this is the reset button, and we'll learn something from that, possibly.
Sure. Yeah. Perhaps so. I sure hope so. Yeah, no, I guess, you know, maybe I'm still in a kind of a fog about it, but anyway, yeah, what you just said, that's a good thought.
Well,
I wonder.
That's the only place I can go with this. I mean, it's like hope for the best and plan for the worst, and wear a mask.
I don't want to say anything negative, So yeah, I'll just go with what you said. Yeah, maybe when it's. I mean, it's possible, and it'll be great if the world was a slightly better place after we'd all gone through this. I don't know.
Could be.
We'll see.
Could be.
Right.
About this time in the late summer of '82, and I kind of mentioned this to you. I was going to summer camp, and I'd stop by, and I live here now. This was a place that I used to visit as a kid. I now live here. But in 1982, I was going to summer camp here, and I stopped in Kalispell, Montana with my family. And Kalispell, Montana was the only place in Montana or anywhere that I knew of that had a record store. And I knew at the time, and it was about a 3-hour drive from my home, but at the time, I knew of the place. So anytime we were there, I would stop, and the place was called Budget Tapes and Records, and definitely there were no budget deals there, especially for me. Everything was brand new. But I remember that August, and I walked in, and I just remember it being really cool. And it's just like it was yesterday, because it was a really, really good memory, a real good summer for me. And Cynical Girl was playing, and I had never heard that, and I had never heard that kind of music. And I asked the owner, the guy, wow. And I actually know him now. His name's Bob, but everybody still calls him Budget Bob, and he hasn't had the record store for a very long time. And I said, "Who is that?" And he said it's Marshall Crenshaw. And I said, "I want that." And so my parents, what I had with me, they'd gotten this boombox as a gift, and they got it for touring a timeshare condo a couple years prior, and that's what I always listened to, and I played that for all my friends, and they started learning the lyrics, and we drove around for years, singing those songs, and I wanted everybody to know who you were, because at the time everybody was listening to Foreigner and Loverboy, and this was something new, and we had Canadian radio as we were up by the border. I was listening to Bruce Cockburn and Gordon Lightfoot. I loved the acoustic-based artists and Elvis Costello, and at the time I only had a chance to hear Elvis Costello on SNL. And so just jumping a few years later back, it must have been about 2013, my best friend Jeff got in a bit of a pinch and a bit of trouble, and I wanted to turn his life around, and I wanted him to remember the times that we had in the 80s, and that cassette was still in my car, which was now driven by my son, because it was the only one we had with a cassette player. And so I mailed him that cassette in a care package, and it got crushed by the post office.
That's right. Yeah, I remember.
And
I remember your story about that. Yes.
He called me and he thanked me, and I couldn't believe it. For a week I thought he was filling me full of BS, and I thought there's no way that cassette, because I would say that I wore that cassette out, but no, it was in every car I've ever owned. Up until that 1999 Chevy Impala, and that had a cassette player in it. And in 2013, that was the end of it. So,
Jeez.
I had other copies since then, but that was my go-to, and probably one of the fondest memories of high school and college I ever had was I listened to that over and over. So it was a beautiful piece. I think, was that your first shot right out of the door? I mean, that was your first attempt at making an album, and it was fantastic.
Well, thanks. And yes, it was my first attempt at making an album, and it was a bit arduous. It wasn't so easy, but we got it done. And,
how old were you when that came out?
I'd had a fair amount of experience with recording before then. Back in 1976 or so, maybe it was 75, a band that I was in we bought some recording gear from a recording studio in Detroit that was liquidating, and it was a place called Sidra Productions, Sidra, and they'd actually, made some kind of semi-hit records in that place, R&B hit records by a group called the Precisions, and I knew these songs from the radio. But anyway, the company folded during the early 70s, I guess, like all through the 60s, there were lots of record companies and recording studios in Detroit. But then by the early 70s, they, like right around the time that Motown left Detroit, as of that moment, the whole thing was kind of gone. And so anyway, somebody in my band saw this ad in the paper, like Montana Digest or something, for a recording studio, equipment. And I remember the whole package was $6,500.
Wow.
And we went to pick it up, and some of the stuff was in the back, like a back room of a body shop, and then some of the rest of it was in the back room of a paint store. And like the guy who was selling it, he was kind of a multi-faceted entrepreneur, let's say, and he had the recording studio, and he had the paint store, and he had the body shop. Anyway, we grabbed all this stuff. We had these two really brilliant guys in our crew, Ron and Brian. These guys put it all together, did a really beautiful job, and it was all tube equipment. And the main tape machine was a Scully 4-track, which was really outdated by the time we got our hands on it, because at that time there was already 16-track and 24-track. That was the state of the art, and we latched onto this 4-track setup. But I really loved it, and I used to spend a lot of time in that place, either with the band or by myself. And that was really the beginning of me being able to record on decent equipment and just get a sense of how to do it, But
that was a huge chunk
I was
of
never
money.
I'm sorry, what?
That was a huge chunk of money back then.
Well, for us it was.
Yeah.
I mean, but compared to what professional studio equipment cost back then, it was nothing, because I mean, now you can make records on a setup that costs a few $100s, and but back then there was no such thing as that by any stretch of the imagination. But anyway, from then I just carried on whenever and recorded however and whenever I could. But then I landed in New York City, and the stars kind of lined up, and I wound up with a record contract, and so yeah, I made the first album.
How old were you when that first came out?
Well, I was late to it. I started that whole thing when I was about 27.
Right.
Which, was late. And so I quickly ran out of youth, you might say, because, like I remember a few years ago watching this MTV concert. It's up on YouTube, and it's from 1986 or thereabouts. And, I'm watching, and it's kind of not so embarrassing and kind of semi okay. And I've noticed I turned around at one point, and you can see this little bald spot on the back of my head. And it's like, oh, there you see, that's bad, right? So anyhow, like I said, I started the whole thing, the career, maybe a later than is average, I guess. It's usually people in their early 20s out there. I was in my late 20s.
It's really changed, though. It
took me that long.
Yeah.
It took me that long to figure out what I wanted to do and do it anyway. That's my story.
It's really changed, though. You do see a lot of bands now that have been together for a very, very long time, and they're making it. I think it's really important to note that people are really, really look hard now for music, and when they see talent, I don't know how the business works now, and I'm not even aware of any of it, but I just know that you have bands that pop up and they're not teenagers, and I think it's really cool that there's a whole bunch of people out there putting together some really, really good music, and it's not restricted by age or looks, obviously by some of the bands we see out there, but at the time, back in the 80s when you were made your first record, I just right now I think to me was such an amazing time, and it's I've been going backwards and discovering these bands that like these new wave bands that from the 80s that I didn't get to hear back then, and it's kind of nice for me now to touch base with that time of my life that I missed some of that. So 80s were a good time.
Well, sure. I mean, at the time, I did really enjoy that moment, that little era that was going on during the couple of years leading up to when I made my first album, and like the late 70s going into the early 80s. I was in New York, really had my radar up and my ears open in all kinds of directions, like I think back to what my go-to radio stations were at that time, and it was, there was one really good rock station. It didn't last that long. It was like 1979, 1980. It was WPIX, and their programming was very eclectic. But they would play. What I loved about them was that they would play, a Clash record, and then right after that, they might play like a Joe Turner record or a Frankie Lyman record, and then from there they would go to the Ramones. Like they actually acknowledged the roots of the music in real time. I thought that was great. That was one of the things that really excited me about that moment in time, is that there was just a lot of sort of synergy, between what was going on right then and the sources of it. People were acknowledging the sources, and that just hit me right where I lived, because I'm an old rock and roll guy at heart, still and always. But anyway, so there was WPIX, this really good rock station. There was WLIB during the day, which was Caribbean music, and like the Mighty Sparrow and lots of Sly and Robbie, great stuff. And then I also listened to, WKTU and WBLS. Those were the black stations, and I really was interested in what the DJs played in the clubs. And I had one ear occasionally, tuned into pop music and just all of that. I just took it all in. But I've been doing that all my life anyway. I always had really eclectic taste. But then while our first album was hit, it was coming out, that was when MTV became a factor. My album, it was really a pre-MTV world when I made it. But then I knew about videos because all the clubs I went to, they would play videos and people would stand there and watch them. Anyhow, it's like the whole, the marketplace changed while my first album was out. And I was cool with it, I was cool with everything right at that moment. Just generally enthusiastic.
One of my favorite things, I love the fact that you covered My Back Pages. That's one of the, wow.
Oh, yeah, that wasn't even my idea. That was
such a good one, though. Wow.
Oh, sure. I mean, it is. Of course, it's a good song. But, it was a friend of mine, a guy named Stuart Lehrman, producing that album. It's like a tribute album to Greenwich Village, I guess, right? You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, that's amazing. I
Yeah, good. It's a great album, but like I didn't play on the track. I just sang on it.
Right.
It's all a guy named Stuart Smith, who's a great guitar player, and Stuart Lehrman. They played everything. But yeah, it's funny. I mean, that track is popular. I saw an article one time in like The Economist or some British periodical or newspaper or something like that, and it was an interview with some bank president or some, kind of somebody from the finance world. And I do remember that a few years later, this guy wound up in trouble or in jail or something. But at the time, he was like, like a respected citizen or something like that. And he gave a playlist, like or maybe he'd even done like a radio program where he played all his favorite music and stuff. And one of the tracks that he liked was that version of My Back Pages.
You killed that. That was amazing. I mean, I always love the song, but wow, I was so glad you did that one. I mean, if you could have picked anything, I mean, that was the one. Jeez. Yeah.
I think Stuart told me to sing the song, but anyway, I'm glad you like it.
Yeah, it's great. So
I like it too.
What was it like growing up in Detroit? What were you listening to then? And you were putting a band together then. What was that like? I mean, that town, changed so much, and from about that point on, I mean, it's unrecognizable.
Oh, sure, yeah. Well, let me see. I was born a very long time ago, 1953, and lived all my life up until I was 23 or thereabouts in the Detroit area. Never in the city of Detroit. And so whenever somebody says I'm from Detroit, I always correct them, because there was like such polarization between the city and the part of the metropolitan area that I grew up in. The stuff that people would always say about the city whenever anybody around me would talk about it was really ugly. And I had people in my family that would brag that they hadn't been to the city of Detroit since the end of World War II. And, like you talk about the decline of Detroit, really a lot of it had to do with bad blood and bad faith directed at the city by the state and the metropolitan region. You might hear the tone of my voice kind of hardening, because this is I hate thinking about all this stuff. But anyway, I was it was just kind of like an average suburban area where I came from, maybe kind of blue collar-ish, I guess. Yeah, I mean, for sure it was. It was okay. I remember one thing I remember is I had a paper route for a couple, 2-3 years, and I was talking to my wife and my son about this, or maybe both my kids. But anyway, we were talking the other day about how on the way to pick up my newspapers, I would stop at somebody's house and collect the 40 cents for the week. That's what it cost a week to get this paper. And I would go to a little party store on the corner, and I would buy 8 candy bars with my 40 cents because they were only a nickel each. And I would eat all the candy bars, while I was delivering the paper. I'd get like a Chunky and a Payday and 8 of them, And then there was another time I decided to get a bag of these glazed donuts I really like, because, now I had an income. So I remember I thought, well, I'm going to get a dozen donuts and eat them all myself. So I went and got this dozen donuts, but I can only eat about 4 of them. And then I did the same thing one day with a whole container of eggnog. I bought a container of eggnog, and I said, I'm going to drink this whole thing by myself. But I only made it about an eighth of the way down, and then I had to stop. But anyway, the one thing about my childhood is that I had a terrible diet. And
did you ever get tested for diabetes?
No, I survived all of that, and I really loved the Detroit area until I started to get a little older, and then plus, just the atmosphere there just kind of got weird over time. And it's, there's like a lot of reasons. I've read about it a lot, like I have a kind of a.
Were you able to discover music there though? Because I mean, that's like the who's who of music. When I'm looking at this list right now, and notable artists of Detroit, you're right between Madonna and Martha Reeves and the Vandellas. So
yeah, it's
a huge list.
As far as that goes, it's like second to none,
right?
Of any place in the world, and it's just. Yeah. That was one beautiful thing about it. Was it was a real like breeding ground or whatever you want to call it, hotbed of artistry and our artistic activity and great music, jazz and everyone. I remember when I was a kid that like listening to the local radio stations. I knew whenever somebody from the area had records on the radio because the DJs would really play up the local stuff and like instill this sense of pride about it with everybody. So there was a guy when I was a kid named Jack Scott who's not well known anymore, but back in the 50s he was really a big star, had a lot of hit records, and he was great too. He wrote his own stuff. He just passed away a little while ago. And then of course there was like Jackie Wilson and like early Motown. I really loved the earliest stuff right away, like Playboy by the Marvelettes and all those great old Miracles records and stuff. And then there was a label in town called Fortune Records, which was really a quirky deal, but great like iconic records from that thing. And then later on, the hippie rock thing and the garage rock thing, it was just all brilliant. I mean, there's so much of it that was really good. And then it still continues, like a lot of innovators come from out of there still, like the whole techno thing and Eminem and
White Stripes.
Yeah, it just it goes. You can't even. We could just name check people for hours.
It's incredible. So they must have had a bunch of different venues. What were the venues that you could see these bands or these groups play?
Well, let me see. Now I would go to these things called, there were like teen clubs where you could go if you weren't old enough to be in a bar. And they would have these drinks that you could buy. That it was supposed to be like a whiskey sour or, a rum and Coke, but it would really be like soda pop and another kind of soda pop. And but anyhow, lots of, what they now call garage bands, mostly played cover tunes, but like an original music scene for rock bands started to develop at this place called the Grandy Ballroom, and that was kind of like the Fillmore of Detroit. And it was just like the hippie music scene in Detroit was really one of the first in the country. And the local radio station WABX, there was a guy in the Detroit area named John Sinclair who's kind of well known, and he was like a real big thought leader, kind of figurehead in the hippie scene. He had been the Detroit correspondent for Downbeat magazine. He was a jazz guy who grew his hair long and got pulled into the rock thing. He had a big influence just on the consciousness of the scene, in the beginning. I was young, I was too young to go to the Grandy Ballroom. I didn't have a driver's license, but I was really interested in all this stuff and just took it all in. We listened to WABX, my friends and I, like it was like, have you ever seen the movie American Graffiti?
I love it. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, how the Wolfman Jack show is always
cool.
on. Well, that was how WABX was to my friends and I, and they played all the usual kind of FM rock stuff of that time, but they also played a lot of jazz and a lot of, like real urban blues, not the fake English stuff. They play the real thing. And anyhow, so where was I? Oh yeah, the Grandy Ballroom. That was where the bands that played original music played, but I was too young to go there. By the time I had a driver's license, the Grandy was gone. A lot of the local scene was gone, but there was this venue called the Easttown Theater, which I went to a lot. And that was an amazing place because you could see, 3 or 4 bands for just a few dollars, and they would be like, I remember I went one night to see this band that I liked called the Soft Machine, and they were the first opening act on a 4-act bill. They played, and then after that was Yes, if you can believe that. And I mean, I never heard of them, and they came out and played, and they were just like so phenomenal. And then right after them was a band called Humble Pie, another English band, and they were incredible. Wow. And then the headline act was I think Mountain, and I really liked them too, But the scene was really small. It wasn't until just a couple of years later, that it would grow really big and bring in a mass audience, and that's when like arena rock started. And I just never had any taste for that. As soon as the scene got bigger than the Easttown Theater, it's like I felt alienated by it, I always liked the intimate kind of spaces and, club scene. That followed me right through to my own career days, I never wanted to be an arena rock act, which was problematic, right?
I think one of the things I think about it, to me, it sounds like, it'd be really exciting to open, not open, but headline in an arena. However, I've seen a lot of local bands in smaller venues, and I've been in big arenas. In the arena, I always feel, 3/4 of the way through, I still want to listen, but I don't have the stamina anymore. I want to go home, but in a small venue, I could sit there for 4 or 5 hours, and there's something. The intimacy is there, and that's part of it. And I just, but Detroit. My Detroit story is I had I was flying to Washington D.C. and I had enough air miles to buy a ticket. And coming back, it was ridiculous. They sent me all over America, to airlines I had never heard of, and they flew me into Detroit. I had a 9-hour layover. So I'm gonna go downtown Detroit. So I'm in the Detroit airport, and I'm getting ready to walk out. And this guy working at the airport said, "Where are you going?" I said, "I'm going downtown." He goes, "Detroit?" I said, "Yeah." And he says, "What do you want to do that for?" And I said, "I want to see Detroit. I want to see downtown." He goes, "No, you don't want to see that."
Terrible.
And I was like, "No, I do." He goes, "How are you going to get there?" And I said, "I'm going to take the bus." He goes, "Have you ever been on a Detroit bus?" I said, "No." And he goes, "It's not like any bus you've ever been on," and totally talked me out of it. And I regret it to this day that I didn't.
What year was that?
That was 2016, I bet.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Are you kidding?
Yeah.
Well, that was an ignorant person that you ran into, I'm sorry to say. You know what? I mean, Detroit is a great place. It really is. I mean, there's parts of it that you aren't so great. Yes, definitely.
Sure.
No question about it. But I just, as an overall, my opinion of it.
Well, I bought into it. And I can't believe it. I'm disappointed to this day because, the last couple of years I've learned more about it. I know people from Detroit, and there's something there. But it just blows me away of the different venues that there used to be, and the notable artists and the amount of creativity that came from somewhere there. And I'm not sure what sparked all that creativity, but man, it's just a who's who of artists.
It is a bummer story most of the way through the story, but no, I mean, this is a good time frame for Detroit. It was, I mean, I don't know now, what with the pandemic and everything, it's probably very problematic for whatever progress they were making. But the last few times, actually most every time I've gone, there's been a good reason for me to be there, and I'm doing something fun. But my family and I went to Detroit a couple of years ago to go to this thing my sister-in-law had passed away, and she had a bunch of money, and she gave a lot of it to this outreach, like a homeless shelter for LGBTQ. And so they honored her as the Ruth Ellis Foundation. They honored my sister-in-law for giving this money posthumously. You know, they honored her, and we went, my family and I, and we just had the best time. Stayed down in the city.
Nice.
I just pass in and out of it. So, I'm a tourist at this point, but
Right.
I really love the city of Detroit.
At the time when La Bamba came out, I had no idea that you were going to be in La Bamba. And of course I went to see La Bamba, and I mean, literally, man, I was shocked. I was totally blown away. I think I like the quote from, I think it was Trouser Press, something about, although you're seen as a latter-day Buddy Holly at the outset, you prove that you're too talented and original to be anybody but yourself. And that's good. That's good.
I bullied the guy into writing that because, we knew each other and we were friendly.
That's good.
But he said something, and I just said, you got to lay off this Buddy Holly thing, okay? And anyway, I heard that.
But I think
as I recall, that's what happened. But no, that is a nice quote. I really like it. And La Bamba, I mean, thank God I was in La Bamba, because it's really had longevity. It's still really beloved. And I don't know. I mean, where might I be right now if I hadn't been in La Bamba? Somewhere, but that's been like a real boon, to my life, that I was in that thing.
So I'm watching it. Yeah, it was amazing. And I was watching it, and I was like, when are you going to be back? I'm waiting for you to appear again. And then, and right. That was disappointing to me, because, I mean, you are who you are, but I mean, that version of Buddy Holly, I mean, it was just, it was crazy. I mean, I was like, I wouldn't have never, ever thought that they would have picked you. But, when you were there, you're in the part. I mean, you are the part. And one of my favorite things about watching movies and sitcoms or characters that are just so incredibly believable. And there you were. And did you ever think that that was going to follow you forever, and you're going to be forced to do, Buddy Holly cover songs from all the Buddy Holly fans that wanted to hear that?
I wouldn't mind one bit, if all I played was Buddy Holly music.
Really?
But I mean, I've never done it.
Right.
And I'm not really inclined to go down that road. But I remember one time I did play this really weird event. To me, it was really weird, but not to the people that were there besides me. But anyway, it was this thing called the Clovis Music Festival in Clovis, New Mexico. That's the name of the town where Norman Petty's studio was, right? That's where Buddy Holly made his records. This little building on the roadside in Clovis, New Mexico is where all those beautiful sounding records were made. And sometime in the 90s, I guess, or maybe late 80s, early 90s, for a half a minute, they were trying to create some kind of scene in Clovis. And so they had this music festival, and I got invited to be there. And so I got up on stage. I played like 9 Buddy Holly songs, and this vocal group called the Roses, that sang on some Buddy Holly records back in the day, they sang along with me, on the ones that they had sung on. Yeah. And I was just like, forget it. I don't want this to end. It just really felt good. And then afterwards I got a compliment from one of the Roses, and I think that he thought that I was a Buddy Holly impersonator, like a professional Buddy Holly impersonator, because he said, I've heard a lot of them, man, but you're the best one I've heard. And so it was just a great little moment for me. But I love that music still, and I loved it when he was alive. I was like 3-4 years old, 5 years old, and my cousins had the records, and I just really was a fan of his. always. And I still listen to those records when I hear them on the radio. I'm like, oh, Buddy Holly, turn it up, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, I think...
So it was a good call for them to ask me to do it, you know, because like you said, there was that thing in the press where people would compare me to him. So that was how it happened, you know? It was just part of the profile that I had was the Buddy Holly comparison thing. So I wound up in La Bamba. And I have no complaints about it at all. So
what did you see yourself as at the time? I mean, when your first record came out, I mean, were you to me, it was something incredibly new. And did you see yourself kind of evolving through this new wave movement, or were you trying to drift in some other direction, like a Buddy Holly direction?
No, like I said, I just had my ears open to everything at that moment. It was rock and roll at the heart of it, for sure.
Yeah.
And I mean, naturally it was. But you know, I was interested in what I was hearing around me at the clubs, you know, like the stuff that was really kind of, I guess you'd say, cutting edge at that moment. I was plugged into that, and so it was just all of the above, you know, like everything I liked from forever. I just grabbed it all and threw it in the pot. And, you know, like I've told this, I've spelled this out before, but like when I was writing Someday, Some Way, my idea was to start with this drum beat, which is always how I start a song. I always figure out what the beat is. I work it from the bottom up. And this time around, it was the beat from this Gene Vincent record called Lotta Lovin', which is a great favorite of mine. And I still marvel at what a groove this record has. It just draws me in every time. But anyhow, you know, that's what the foundation of Someday, Some Way was, that beat. And then it's the same kind of beat on this other one called Party Doll by Buddy Knox, which is a childhood favorite. So I started with that beat, and then I threw the lyrics together. I didn't even know what they were about at first. I kind of thought about it later on. But anyway, you know, the beat from the Gene Vincent record, and then it's got like the Phil Spector sleigh bells on it, and the Eddie Cochran hand claps, and it's just, but it's my sound, you know.
Right.
And then that's it. It's some little bit of this and a little bit of that, but it's rock and roll music. That was always what I wanted to make. I wanted to write good rock and roll songs and make good rock and roll records.
Yeah, Someday, Some Way. That's if anybody listening has never heard it, that's wow. Yeah, that's
a Cynical Girl you mentioned before. I mean, you might not have thought of it this way, but you know, it's got kind of like a disco thing to it with Four to the Bar on the bass drum, and then the hand claps. We were trying to copy the sound of the hand claps on Le Freak by Chic. You know that record?
Yeah.
The hand claps on that record, they sound, you know,
right.
It's the crazy sound, and we were trying to copy that sound. So anyway, I just loved everything I was hearing right at that moment. I was high on life.
Yeah.
And
good times. I mean,
that's what the music is a reflection of, you know, just what was going on around me and how much enthusiastic I was about all of it.
So you did a remastered, reissued version of it? I don't have it.
Of the first album?
Yeah. What am I reading?
Yeah, Rhino Records, they did that. And I don't know I'm not so sure it was remastered. I don't remember that, but there were bonus tracks.
Right. Ray Vaughan.
Actually, well, yeah, it's kind of vague anymore for me to remember, but because they did a best of at the same time, like a really nice 2 CD set. And then the first album, you know, they went into this deluxe reissue thing with my stuff at that time. It was, you know, that really blew my mind. I was really pleased that they did all that, you know.
So where they added You're My Favorite Waste of Time. Where did that come from? When did you write that?
Just during that period, you know, when I wrote all that stuff. I wrote all those songs within, maybe like a 10-month period, more or less.
Just poured out.
And it did, because I had the idea in my head. I had the formula in my mind of how to create a distinctive sound. I had the sound first, and then I needed the songs to go with it, you might say. So I just went at it, and favorite waste of time. It was just, it's just one of the things I did. And then I believe it was Bob Merlis. He was the head of publicity at Warner Brothers. And I'm not sure, but I think it was him that suggested having a non-LP B-side on Someday, Some Way, right? And we didn't really have any good outtakes from the album sessions, so I just grabbed a home demo of mine and put it on there. And then that song went on to have this really long life unto itself. But it was just a little thing I made in my living room on a 4-track machine. It gathered a cult following right away as soon as that single came out.
So what happened to that $6,000 worth of equipment? Did it stay with you guys for a while?
Not for very long, and I mean, the band, it was, it was a big band, a lot of guys. It just blew apart eventually. And, of course, I mean, it wasn't really built to last, or it wasn't supposed to last, I guess. Just kind of anyhow, the music we recorded, it just, nothing ever came of it. We never put out an album or anything. But, when the band broke up and we shut the place down, then we sold off all the equipment. And it's too bad too, because, there was some great stuff in there, stuff that later on became really valuable, like these Neumann mics we had, and whatever, it just was good. I really loved the setup that we had. It was all tube equipment, just completely out of date at that moment, but it really appealed to me. So that's all. It just got sold off here and there.
Some of my favorite rock and roll stories. Had a roommate back in the day in the mid '80s, and he was in a lot of different bands. And while I was going to college, he probably was in 5 or 6 different bands. And one of the things that they always had were really nice guitars, and they were all vintage Fender guitars or Gibson. But at that time, these guys would, there were so many bands in the area that they were trading equipment, and somebody would be broke and they needed $20, and they would give somebody a guitar and they would never pay that $20 back. So these guys always had these great guitars, and I always got to hear these guitar stories about where they came from, and they're super proud of all these guitars. But then again, something could happen, and these guys would get rid of one of these prized guitars, and not even think about it and pick up something a couple weeks later. But, equipment back then, the tube stuff is just dynamite. I would love to see just that. I love vintage stuff.
Yeah, me too. I really do. But, it just comes and goes over the course of a long life, right? I mean, I have some things that I've had for years and years and decades and stuff. But records I have from back in the 70s that I bought. Some of them I haven't even played since then, but I just keep carting them around as I go through my life. But anyway, that's just the way it goes.
So
and with other stuff.
You have links to some of my favorite bands. I love the Jim Blossoms, and you actually wrote or co-wrote Till I Hear It From You. And when was that?
That would have been, I guess, about 1995, 96, I think.
Yeah. How'd that happen?
Well, they reached out to me, which was really great. I didn't know them, but they were fans. I'll give you a little backstory on that. I was at this club in Nashville one time, the Exit Inn, which might still be there. I don't know. But anyway, I'm standing there listening to this band called Will and the Bushmen. They were like a local Nashville rock band, and they were really good. And Will is Will Kimbrough, who's kind of well known now, great guitar player. He plays with Emmylou Harris, I think. But anyway, I'm standing there watching these guys, and I'm enjoying it a lot. But they're crazy loud, right? So the worst thing that somebody can do is come over and start talking to you right at that moment. And, in order to talk to you, they got to scream in your ear. But people used to do that all the time, I'd see people, when I was up on stage playing myself, I would see people screaming into each other's ears while we're blowing the place up with our amplifiers. But anyway, there I am watching Will and the Bushmen, and a woman came up to me, and I did know her, but she just kind of like leaned her mouth into my ear and started yelling about this band that she said she was managing called the Gin Blossoms. And I asked the guys about it later on, and they were like, no, she never was our manager. But anyway, this woman said that these guys are big fans of yours, that they, all that stuff, And so she said, let me send you their album. They made an album just to sell at their shows in Arizona, and they sent it to me, and it had some early versions on it of some of the tunes that they would do later on. But anyway, so I knew about them, and then jump ahead 2 years, and all of a sudden they're like huge, the Gin Blossoms, right? Their first album comes out, like 3 hit singles right in a row. And I went to see them one night in New York City, but I didn't go backstage afterwards, which I kind of don't understand now. But like I said, I didn't know them, so I didn't want to go through the whole thing of having to bullshit my way into the dressing room and the whole bit, so I just split. But anyway, when we wrote that song, what happened was one of the guys reached out to me and asked me if I would help them write a song. And I'm like, oh yeah. It took me about a fraction of a second to say yes to that, because, I knew that whatever they were going to put out was going to be a hit right at that moment. And, they're friends of mine now for sure, like great friends. And it didn't take long for us to become friends. Once I met, the first guy I met was Jesse Valenzuela. He's the one who really was kind of spearheaded, he was the one that reached out to me, as I recall. And he's just a great guy, like a really fine human being from my experience. And we wrote the song, and that was it. It just came on the radio and became a smash hit immediately. Stayed on the radio for a year. It was great. It was the first time that I'd had a hit in a while, and it didn't come a minute too late, you might say. It was cool.
One of my other favorite lead singers who just was so sad when he passed away, but Pat from the Smithereens, and you got to sit in with the Smithereens. How many times? And how was that? I've never seen it. I'd love to see that.
Well, we were still doing it. I mean, the last live gig I played before the pandemic set in was cool. I did 2 shows with them.
Nice.
The very weekend before the whole thing got, the pandemic came along. So, I mean, I'm kind of like, I'm their guest lead vocalist. And the other one who kind of fills in sometimes, it's mostly me, but whenever it's not me, it's Robin from the Gin Blossoms.
Right.
Speaking of the Gin Blossoms, so I don't know. I mean, I suppose we'll play together again sometime. I just can't even imagine any gigs now. It just seems like such a far-fetched concept. But no, I mean, I just was doing. It was one of the things I was doing. I did. I guess over the course of about a year and a half, I did maybe 25 shows with them. And it was great, they're just great people.
Fantastic songs. Really good.
It's
songs.
fun. Yeah. I agree. I knew Pat. He was a interesting guy and a friend, of mine for many years.
Wow.
And I hated to see what happened to him, but
right.
Anyway, it just went down that way. It was kind of that was it. And sure, what a crazy story.
Yeah, I remember I bought one of their albums a long time ago, and first time I ever heard them was on the local radio station, and back then in the late mid 80s we had a couple good radio stations. Nothing though that like you'd hear from the big cities and like LA or New York, but it's still like you got a little bit of exposure, and I think right now it's incredible that you have a lot of touring bands that have made it and are big, and they're showing up in Montana. We have some venues. It was a jam-packed concert schedule. For me this summer was supposed to be 2 days ago. I was supposed to see the Decemberists with my daughter, and didn't happen, and what a bummer. But hopefully that'll.
Well, if there was a show tomorrow that I could play, I would do it. But it just, I had something in October that I knew was going to get canceled, and it finally did the other day. And then I have another one on the calendar for November, but I'm sure it'll get canceled. Yeah. It's just they haven't done it yet. But I have a streaming concert actually on the 7th of August from this venue called Daryl's House.
Yeah, I love it. I've watched every one of those.
Right down the road from me is Daryl's House, and now they're going to have. This will be good because I won't have to use my phone to do it. I can use a professional stage setup with good mics and good video and good lights and the whole bit. There won't be an audience in the place, but.
So when is that going to happen?
The 7th of August.
Wow, I'm excited about that. That's going to be amazing. Any idea when that's going to air on his website?
I imagine it goes out live and then they probably archive it.
Wow. That's special.
I'm guessing.
Special. Yeah.
I know it will be. I just got a new Martin acoustic 12-string, so I'm going to be playing acoustic guitars for the time being, and I get to try out my new 12-string at this show. That'll be fun.
So they'll do some of your songs, and then you'll do some of their songs.
No, it's just me. It's my show.
Oh, it's just you. No, so he's doing it. Okay. Because usually they.
No, you're thinking of the TV show.
Yeah.
Daryl's House. This is a venue.
Okay.
Called Daryl's House. And Daryl. I think he goes in there once in a while.
Right. Okay. So he put together. That venue, not his actual house. That's right. He did.
Yeah. I was aware of that TV thing while it was happening.
Yeah. Still, I'm excited.
Something else. Sure. Oh, me too.
Let's get it
without a doubt.
Yeah, because one of my favorites too is the. I think you did it. I don't know when you did this, but it's the 20 Summers concert that you did. That's a good one. I mean, that's just a really good low key sit down and if you're craving something live from Marshall, man, that's a good one. Love it.
Thank you. That was a beautiful place out on Cape Cod. Really nice. Atmosphere stuff.
Yeah, I don't want to keep you out hanging out in front of the post office. The Postal Inspection Service might haul you in, or they might hire you. They're shorthanded right now. So, Marshall Crenshaw, thank you very much. What's that bell in the background?
Well, like I said, I'm in the middle of the town I live in, and for some reason, maybe there's a church service. I don't know, but it's the 10 o'clock bell. It's 10 o'clock here, and it sounds like it's a real bell too. It's not one of those recorded bells that they use sometimes.
So if you get a chance and get a version of that show you're going to do on YouTube or somewhere, let me know. I'd love to see that.
Yeah, there'll be something posted on my artist's Facebook page about it, so you'll know how to receive it if you want to.
And you have a website?
I do, yeah. There'll be something up there too.
MarshallCrenshaw.com, great website. A lot of stuff there to look at, and yeah, sir, go home by all means, and thank you so much for joining me. I appreciate this. It's been a big honor, and couldn't have had a better night.
Yeah. Thank you, Cam. Thanks for reaching out to me, and stay well, okay?
Take care. Good night, sir.
Bye-bye.